From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Noory. Welcome to Coast AM. Later on tonight, open lines for you. We'll talk about just about anything. North Korea, here we go again, has developed a large caliber, multiple launch rocket system that has the capability to strike South Korea as early as this year. The announcement, reported in the Washington Post, comes a day after a South Korean official said the North has the ability to mount a nuclear warhead on a medium-range missile that could strike targets in Russia, China, Japan, and the Korean Peninsula. I suspect somebody like us that something's going to happen. I just feel this in my gut. You can't continue to see these things happening in North Korea, hear the things that they're doing, the videos that they're putting out about destroying the United States with nukes. I think something's going to happen, folks. Top Zika investigators now believe that the birth defect, microcephaly, and the paralyzing Guillain-Barré syndrome may be the most obvious maladies caused by the mosquito-borne virus. Fueling that suspicion are recent discoveries of serious brain and spinal infections, including encephalitis, meningitis, and myelitis in people exposed to Zika. This could be a dreaded disease. Dr. Gary Ridenauer, who looks at pandemics. Gary, the Zika virus, first of all, is it as bad as they're saying right now?
It is now. There's 59 countries involved, and I don't want to sound like I'm coming from John Goodman's new movie that's out, but it's starting to really cause concern around the world. Two women in Vietnam have just shown up with it from local mosquitoes, and an Australian tourist came back from Vietnam, and he had the disease. George, if you look at the CDC map of countries that have the potential, you see Mexico, Cuba, and then half of Latin America, and of course now Vietnam are potential countries that are going to be permanently infected.
Well, Gary, we're beginning to see some cases crop up in the United States from people who have traveled abroad as well. What's going to happen in the summertime? It gets hot, and mosquitoes are all over the place.
Well, that's an interesting situation. The Guillain-Barré we'll talk about in a second, but Latin America, in our summertime, it's wintertime down there, and it starts to get cold and starts to rain. So they claim that maybe the Zika infection will go down because it's wintertime down there, but I'm certainly not betting on it.
All right, my friend, Dr. Gary Ridenauer, he knows pandemics and he knows these kinds of situations. The world is facing an unrelenting march of diabetes, which now affects nearly 1 in 11 adults. In a major report, it warned that cases had nearly quadrupled to 422 million in 2014 from 108 million in 1980. High blood sugar levels are a major killer linked to 3.7 million deaths around the world each year. Christian Wild, he's one of our researchers and noted author. Diabetes, it's that bad, huh, Christian?
You know what? This is a wake-up call. I don't know how many people are aware, George, that half of the U.S. adults already have diabetes or pre-diabetes. And not to be too philosophical at this late hour, but this life we have, it's precious and it's frail. So this could be a good time for all of us to declare war on this disease, particularly when we realize that it triples the risk of a heart attack. I mean, the risk was bad enough in the first place, but diabetes triples the risk of a heart attack. It increases the risk of stroke, kidney failure, blindness as diabetic retinopathy and diabetic neuropathy with that incredibly debilitating nerve pain, and diabetes even complicates pregnancy, so young moms need to be aware also. Now, before your doctor prescribes a medication like metformin, which has a very good reputation for lowering A1C and glucose, the first line of defense will be diet and exercise.
Yes.
They will recommend things we can all do, like avoiding white bread, potatoes, white rice, processed foods.
All the good stuff.
All the good stuff that we know we're not supposed to be eating. They'll suggest daily walks, 30 minutes, and maybe dropping 10 to 15 times. All good advice. So maybe you would want to share this piece of study advice with your doctor. It appeared in the Journal of the American Diabetes Association in 2012, so it must be reliable. Over a 9-month period, 250 milligrams of turmeric extract had proven 100% effective at preventing prediabetes patients from progressing to type 2. Incidentally, George, there's 400 milligrams in our formula.
Good.
So other studies have claimed similar results for those who already had type 2. And the point is this: diabetes is a controllable disease, but it's up to us.
Well, when you hear stories, Christian, that people have died because of diabetes, symptoms of diabetes, and if it's that controllable, why does this happen?
Because people aren't getting involved. I don't think the medical profession has made us aware enough of what an incredibly devastating disease it is. And just like I shared tonight, all of these different things, tripling a heart attack, stroke, kidney failure, blindness, all of these things that are associated with too high glucose and A1C levels. Your doctor will test you for your A1C probably twice in a year, and that is a more indicative of how your overall level is, because your glucose goes up, all through the day. You can have 5 readings in one day and they'll all be different. But the A1C level is very important. I don't know how many doctors are actually checking their patients for that.
Oh, mine does. Mine does. He's a
so
stickler.
people need to just ask for it. Ask for your
It's
A1C
a simple
and your glucose
test.
level.
All right, Christian, thank you so much. A tax advocacy group, listen to this, revealed that Americans spend more on taxes than their whole budget for food, clothing, and housing. Unbelievable. Country music legend Merle Haggard, who was known for his hits like this song, "Okay from Muskogee" and "Mama Tried," is dead. He died at the age of 79 on his birthday. Haggard's manager, Frank Mull, said the icon died in California of pneumonia that he had been battling for months. He had kept up with a touring schedule, but the pneumonia in both lungs forced him to cancel several shows this year. Merle Haggard dead at the age of 79. Story we have in the news at coasttocoastam.com. A pair of Florida hunters bagged a 15-foot, 800-pound alligator, and photos of the massive specimen have gone viral. We've got that story at coasttocoastam.com. 15-foot, 800-pound alligator. And the Catholic Church in Rome is offering a week-long course on casting out the devil, preparing priests and some lay people on the finer points of exorcism and demonic possession. It is a course to teach people how to get rid of the devil. Up next now, let's go to Stephen Cates with his update on what's going on in the skies. Are we really going to have a green moon in a couple weeks, Stephen, or is that a rumor?
Oh, no, George, we're going to have a green moon. The full grass moon will be coming up here in April. And what a magnificent night it is across the coast audience tonight, at least in the skies, George. And here's some tips. In our last edition, we talked so much about Jupiter. And tonight is a magnificent night with this planet. So if you're able to look high up into your skies right now across the coast audience, and you see that bright white object near the meridian, near the north-south line, George, take a look in the telescope. There are more transits and eclipses happening right now with the basic 4 Galilean satellites than probably this entire season in which Jupiter is visible. So people who are watching this, you'll see some of the moons transiting across the front of the planet, eclipsing, just magnificent. But at this new moon time, George, the dark of the moon, it's really a good time to get out and see some of the major planets. And how about this one? In this week's edition, look into the west just after sunset, the planet that Nicholas Copernicus, the father of all of our sun-centered solar system, so to speak, you can actually get to see the planet he never could. And it's the planet Mercury, George, which is pretty much high, 15, 20 degrees into the western part of the sky. But in the morning, it really gets good. So about an hour or two before sunrise, look into the south. The 2 magnificent planets that you'll see right near the southern part of the sky and pretty high. Mars, it's getting large enough that I can see in my telescope, George, and they can too, and you can. Surface details, Mars is coming close. Saturn just to the left of it. And that comet that was in the southern hemisphere, George, the comet 252P Linear, is now about 10 degrees up in binoculars away from Saturn. This comet is still visible in small binoculars in the dark skies to take advantage of the dark of the moon, George. But yes, the moon will appear to look slightly green, the beautiful grass moon, as we come up here in April, another great month to watch the skies.
Stephen, I love your space and sky weekly updates. They're fantastic. You help a lot of people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, George. Have a great week.
Up next, Dr. Judy Wood back with us. One of her books, of course, is Where Did the Towers Go? She's going to update us on the very sad situation of the Twin Towers during 9/11 with her theory, directed energy technology. She's next on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast. Dr. Judy Wood with us for the next couple hours, former professor of mechanical engineering. She has research expertise in experimental stress analysis, structural mechanics, deformation analysis. She knows what she's talking about. Her book, Where Did the Towers Go? Evidence of Directed Free Energy Technology on 9/11. Judy, welcome back to the program. Good to have you.
Well, thank you very much. Good to be back.
When we started talking about this a couple of years ago, it buzzed around the country. People just went, oh my God, have you heard that? In the last couple of years, have you changed your thoughts? Have you picked up updates? What's going on?
Well, the important thing is a theory can get updated and changed and so forth, but evidence is a fact. It's always the same. For example, are the towers still there or are they gone? That's observable evidence. Right. You know, I was there once. I saw they were there. I went in them. Now I go there and they're gone. So for me, I've observed that is evidence that the tower is no longer there. That's not a theory.
No, it's not a theory, but that's obvious. But
so is the rest of the evidence. It's not a theory. If you look at the evidence, and that's what it takes for a trained observer. You mentioned about my credentials and my background. That's what it's in, forensic engineering.
What was it, Judy, that when this first happened, this tragedy, that made you think of this kind of directed energy to take these buildings down? What did you see?
I didn't think of that. I listened to the evidence and let the evidence tell me what happened. And what happened was the buildings didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground. The majority of them turned to dust in midair.
Pulverized, basically.
No, turned to dust. Pulverized implies grinding, and vaporized implies high heat. Neither one of those apply. We don't have a word in our vocabulary for it, so I created a new word to describe it, dustification.
Now, when we talk about directed energy, what kind of apparatus could do such a thing?
I talk about the destructive mechanism. The energy was instructed to do something differently than it normally does. You know, the binding forces in the matter, instead of being attracted to each other, they repel each other. The various atoms in the material. You know, we have a solid object in our hand because the atoms in there have bonded to each other. But if you can get them to reverse and to repel each other, the material comes apart. So we observe, and this is very important to observe, not to start out with an answer and work backwards. A forensic engineer starts out with the evidence and moves forward. And if you move forward in a scientific method, your answer that you come to will be irrefutable. But if you go the reverse way, you end up starting out with a theory and then cherry-picking data to support your theory. And that's bias. That's what amateurs do. But, you know, for example, what is what do you call an autopsy? Either it's conclusive or it's inconclusive.
Well, that's right.
It's not a theory.
All right. In this particular case, though, I'm curious, when we talk about some kind of directed energy to make the atoms and the molecules fall apart.
Right. There's something instructed the binding forces in the material to repel each other.
What was that something?
And I'm calling it, you know, whether it's instructed or directed, it's directed to do something differently than it normally does.
I know, but what does that?
Something. We don't have to jump to the answer, but what we do observe is that happened, and the material turned to dust in midair on the way down, to the point that you don't have a thud hitting the ground.
I mean, in your opinion, what kind of technology do you need to have?
Again, it's nothing to do with opinion. It's observable evidence.
Well, no, Judy, here's my point. These buildings don't. Hold on. These buildings don't. Judy, can you hear me?
The material turned to dust in midair.
But something did that, right?
That's right. There you go.
What? But what did it?
Therefore, that proves that something exists that can do what was done, because it happened. That's the proof.
But my question is, what did it?
Some gizmo, some technology. That technology we know exists.
How far does this gizmo have to be from the buildings to do that?
I can't answer that. I can only show you parallel evidence of how you can reproduce the same things. But again, it's important to come back and observe. Like I observed on that day, the buildings were turning into dust in midair. That was not a collapse. It was shown to virtually the whole world, but few people knew how to observe because they were told it was a collapse, so they assumed that's what a collapse looks like, without observing the buildings turning to dust in midair. Therefore, something exists that can do what was done. So that's our proof that such a technology exists that can direct energy to do something differently that normally does.
Now,
the power of that. This is a big one.
Oh, that's huge power. Huge.
Yes. It can affect the binding forces of matter.
Does this apparatus, that's what I'm going to call it for now, for lack of a better word, does this apparatus have to be close or far from the buildings to do this, in your opinion?
All I know is what you use as parallel, that creates parallel evidence. And we can see this natural phenomenon that does the same thing. It occurs in nature, so it's not a totally new phenomenon. It's just that people aren't used to observing it. Think about it. Tornadoes. Now imagine if somebody weaponized a tornado.
Or directed it.
Right. If the tornado does something with the energy in the material, and it causes it to do something differently than it normally does, cause it to come apart. You've seen weird pictures after tornadoes gone through a neighborhood where the roof is off the house, but not a paper is out of place on the bookshelf inside. That's not wind.
Tesla was working on a device that might have had similarities to what you think happened to these buildings.
Yes, and he even offered to Congress, if they put up towers every 200 miles around the perimeter of the U.S., he said he would install a little box on each that would create a kind of a force field through which any airplane that tried to pass would, quote, dematerialize.
See, my little mind, Judy, thinks that you need some kind of technology, a gun, a weapon that beams this. Maybe it's on another building aimed at the Twin Towers.
Not necessarily. If we look at what John Hutchison does, that in all of the evidence that he shows with his setup mimics the same piece of evidence. Levitation, dematerialization.
So it could be done from afar.
True, yes. And how John Hutchison does it is creates a static field, and within that static field interferes various radio frequency signals.
Now here's something that has always puzzled me. If the buildings were disintegrated with this kind of technology, what would have happened to the people in that building as well? I would have assumed that they would have disintegrated the same way.
Yes, that's why pretty much the number of what was referred to as jumpers I call it people who left the building early.
Yeah.
I don't think they voluntarily jumped.
Hold on, Judy. We're going to take this break. We'll be back with more on Coast to Coast AM. And we're going to take your phone calls next hour with Dr. Judy Wood. Where did the towers go? And welcome back to Coast. George Noory with you, along with Dr. Judy Wood. Judy, explain to us, if you can, the technology behind what it would take to really tear apart these atoms and molecules and create this powder of all these materials, brick, steel, everything else.
I'm not into speculation and theorizing. I look at the evidence, and what the evidence shows is that such a technology that can do what was done must exist.
But what does it do? That's my question.
Oh, the lots of different evidence that I've got on my website and in my book, and I go through it very carefully. The biggest part is it's noticeable, if you look at the evidence, is that the majority of the building turned to dust in midair without hitting the ground, just encountering air on the way down.
I know, but what is required to do that?
That I can provide parallel evidence, but I can't tell you what the model number was that was used, who the operator was, and what the operator had for breakfast, and so forth. That's not so important.
I don't want to know that. I just want to know
Okay.
what technology was required in order to do this horrible thing.
Well, I can tell you what evidence it produces: magnetic-electrogravitic nuclear reactions.
Okay, now explain that to a layman.
Magnetic, electricity, and magnetism. They're really all different sides of the same coin. They're all interrelated. And it's pretty powerful stuff. I think most folks remember in Cub Scouts or Girl Scouts winding a wire around a nail, plug it in a 9-volt battery, and voila, the nail becomes a magnet. And we can also do the reverse. So we know that electricity and magnetism are interrelated, and that's actually how hydroelectric power plants run, like what Tesla created at Niagara Falls.
How directional did this have to be to do this, to get these towers, and maybe Building 7 too?
It appears it's an interference process because of the abrupt boundaries. If it takes, like what John Hutchison uses, is a static field, and within that interferes a radio frequency signal. There was a large static field in the area, just happened to be that day. I don't know if it was used, but it was there. That is provided by Hurricane Aaron. There was you know how you have an electrical field ahead of a large storm system.
Right.
And there was dry thunder at the 3 major airports. LaGuardia, Newark, and JFK airports all reported thunder that day on 9/11. And the hurricane was just off the end of Long Island. Remember, it doesn't have to be over Manhattan. The outer bounds of the static field extend way out.
Well, now that's an interesting take, too. Does this have to happen from above, or can it be done on the side from a distance? How does it have to be directed?
Again, I look at what John Hutchison's work is. It creates a static field that's in the environment all around, and within that interferes radio frequency signals. An example of that most people are familiar with is a cell phone. Having a working cell phone doesn't get you a conversation. You have to be in the service area.
That's right.
Within the reach of a cell phone tower. And most people, and I'm guessing you're one of them, when you make a cell phone call, do you know which tower you're connected to?
I have no idea, Judy.
Right. You're just within the field. So if you have a static field that's like the reach of a cell phone tower, imagine that, and then you need something else to interfere with it, to connect with it.
Now, right before the break, we were talking about what would happen to some of the people in the building, sadly, and we saw this desperation where, we, as you said, you called them the jumpers. What happened to them? Did they ever find them?
Jump. They didn't necessarily jump. There's approximately 1,200 people that left the building early out the windows, and there was another 343 firefighters and first responders.
Right.
That brings the total up to about 1,543. There was only approximately 1,600, just shy of 1,600, and after several years they identified some more DNA of bodies or DNA that was identified. So it appears that all that was identified was what left the building before the total destruction of the building. And those who remained inside the building, there wasn't even a trace of DNA of them.
Now, some of the metal girders were still around because they piled them up and shipped them out pretty darn fast.
Not necessarily. That's what people were told. But then you look at by noon, were they shipped out before noon on that day? Because there's essentially nothing left. There's not nothing, but there's very little debris left because it dustified.
Have you put together now your conclusions, even a couple years after the book's been out, of motivation? Why this happened?
No, but I have actually seen for the first time a possibility of that. Again, okay, that's stepping into a different realm of speculation, but you just look at the pattern of what goes on. And also how easy it is to run cover-ups. This has been covered up so carefully. And you look at the way I get marginalized, and whatever I say gets distorted, pretty much.
Do you still get attacked?
Oh, tremendously. But I'm used to it. Those are, people who don't think through things or understand what, like someone says my book is all hogwash, but they haven't read it. What does that tell you about?
Exactly.
And that's basically what it is. I think it becomes a hobby for a lot of people. But why don't they care about the world around them? That's the scary part. But if you look at what the effects were, looking back, and you remember the first time I was on your show, I gave you a speculative story, and it seems to be becoming more true, which is if a group of 5 people who want to destroy or take over the U.S., you don't go in the front door because the U.S. military would come get you.
That's right.
So you poof the towers, and you get a truth movement or something going on within, and get everybody to hate their government so badly they want any government but the one they have. Then you walk in the front door, and they welcome you with open arms.
They almost beg you to come in.
Yep. Now think about, since I was on your show first, how that is coming true.
Well, and nothing's more indicative than what's going on right now with the elections.
Yes. And also, if you look back at what people were trained to believe on that day, what messages subliminally were inserted into everyone's mind when they're in this traumatic, stressed out state. Total destruction of the buildings, Muslims.
Planes.
Yep. Muslims equal total destruction.
And look what's going on now.
Right. It's as though people have been conditioned for that.
If somebody has this technology available, why don't they continue to use it? To topple other governments. It would seem to be easy to do that.
Well, it depends on what their objective is, and I won't speculate on totally on their objectives. But looking at this pattern, now we've been ramped up into worrying about a nuke hitting us.
Yeah, well, that might happen.
And if there's total destruction of the city, people would easily believe that nuke did it.
Yes, that's true.
Bingo.
That is true. Judy,
think about that. Think about that. It could easily be this technology, but people would be led to believe it was a nuke.
Well, without the mushroom cloud, I guess, right?
Well, there was a whole lot of dust that went up, and it sure looked like a mushroom cloud to a lot of people.
Well, there was a lot of dust during that situation, that's for sure.
So it could be easily sold as a nuke.
Well, tell me about Dr. Judy Wood before this tragedy occurred, before you wrote the book, before you came up with your thoughts about it. What were you doing before 9/11 occurred, what were you doing in your career, in your life?
Well, I was a professor and teaching graduate classes, undergraduate classes, and lab classes in forensic engineering and experimental mechanics.
Did you ever think that you would be entering this kind of field, investigating what you've investigated?
Well, not totally, but I go wherever, I just want to find out what happened about the world around me. I would think more people would be curious about the world around them. Like what happened on February 1st, 2003, when the space shuttle Columbia came apart.
Yeah.
I figured out just what happened within a few minutes. And I told my students on Monday, and they said, "Oh, that couldn't be because the tiles come off all the time." I said, "Well, maybe when it hits the runway, but those are brake pads, and those brake pads are smoking when it's coming down through the atmosphere."
Sure.
And so it needs that protection. And I said, "Wait a minute, you guys just studied thermal expansion. We're having a test on Thursday. I bet you guys could even figure this out. I'll put it on the test," and I did. And the temperature that came out to, I asked what the lowest temperature was where you get your first failure. It was spot on when the report came out 6 months later.
Well, are you saying that the Space Shuttle Columbia was taken down?
No, the thermal expansion issue.
Oh, okay.
Just a small amount of temperature change.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
And these students, I'm so proud of them, they were able to calculate it. And I said, "So now you'll know when the report comes out that you were right." And that was the grandest fun. The students fondly referred to me as the disaster queen, because I would like to study what happened. Because that's what engineers do. How do you make something better to keep it from failing next time?
Well, to have an electromagnetic piece of technology to cause the kind of, let's call it dustification, as you've called it, of these buildings. I mean, would it have to be the size of a tank? How big do you think this apparatus was or is?
Well, for example, how big was Hurricane Aaron?
Big.
500 miles across?
Big.
It depends on what you're talking about as to where something came from. And figuring out the serial numbers and all that doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't answer the question, but what happened answers the question. It's kind of like the autopsy. Rather than, speculating on a whole lot of things, just do an autopsy and see what the answer is. And then you know what it is that you know, and know that everything else you don't know.
I mean, could it have been as small as a crate, a small box somewhere, and they just turned it on?
It's whatever signal it is. How big is a tornado?
Well, tornadoes are big, Judy.
Some are small.
Well, I don't know how small they are, but I know they're big.
Some are small. Some are, just a few feet in diameter. But it depends more on what the mechanics are, what that's going on in the system. And for example, what John Hutchison did, he was bending 2.5-inch diameter solid molybdenum pieces, look like a corkscrew, or solid pieces of copper. They get other things that would come apart, or get material that would just melt into itself, or into something else. Like he has a piece of wood embedded in aluminum. If you melted that aluminum hot enough to flow over the wood, it would burn up the wood. So that right there shows that there's something else going on. It's not just heat.
Folks like Richard Gage and the architects who have their own theories of what happened to the building, what do they think of yours?
They have theories. They haven't done the first step. The first step in any forensic analysis is to determine what happened. Mm-hmm. If you start with how, then you go cherry-picking something and you have ideas and you don't get anywhere. It's like, let's not look at an autopsy, let's speculate on what happened. So you go into court and you say, Your Honor, I don't know how the victim died, but this guy over here is the one who did it. It's saying it's an inside job. It's the same kind of thing. But getting back to the dissimilar materials fusing together, there was a wonderful piece of evidence at the 9/11 Museum that was ended up on TV, and people didn't realize what they're looking at. It was they called it a Bible, but I think it was I called it a Bible artifact because I think it was a concordance or something like that. But it looked like a Bible, and it had metal fused to it in a beam, and formerly molten metal rolling down over the page. The page wasn't burned up.
And it should have been.
If
under a normal fire,
if it was hot.
If it was hot.
So this shows it was liquid without being hot. And the Pope came over and looked at it and bowed down, then he moved on. I was curious what he thought of it.
Now, this technology, like Tesla, is it grabbing the kind of field out of the atmosphere to do what has to be done?
Well, it depends on what you call in the atmosphere, the static field in the environment. And there's something that I am really concerned about, which is, with smart meters and cell phone towers and radio frequency signals. You get in the Midwest, you get normal storm systems that move through.
Right.
They create a static field. And then you have radio frequency signals between them. We know in a controlled environment, like what John Hutchison can show, is what that does. And so there's interaction between these things. I'd like to see the environmental impact statement.
Are you under constant bombardment because of your work?
Bombardment of what sort?
Well, I mean, has it been difficult for you, or are organizations coming at you like crazy?
A lot of people email me to, let's see. I never read a book in my life, but I know you're wrong, or I know you're right, and I have some top secret information to give you. Just people like that. There's a lot of those. The ones who really know something. Do you think that 9/11 those who planned it didn't plan a cover-up?
I think that those involved in 9/11 planned everything, all the way down to their escape mechanism for themselves.
Do you think those who planned the cover-up didn't think people would be asking questions?
Oh, they knew that would happen. But they also probably hoped it would just go right over and they'd believe anything.
Well, if there's a few, bright people who start asking questions, they look for other like-minded individuals. So if you establish an organization, build it and they will come. So you collect them and you keep them occupied so they don't go anywhere and cause any problems.
Would you like to see this technology up front and personal?
Oh, I have. I've seen it on a small scale.
Are there scientists out there right now by name that we know who have helped contribute to making this?
Oh, there are various folks who know this technology, and various ones are involved in the cover-up in various ways.
All right, Judy, we're already through the first hour, but we're going to come back and take calls next on Coast to Coast AM. Well, with Dr. Judy Wood, let me tell you something. She's got the credentials. Professor of Mechanical Engineering, Structural Mechanics. She's had stress analysis expertise as well. And we're talking about her work, Where Did the Towers Go? We'll get your thoughts, too, in a moment with your calls on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Dr. Judy Wood with us. We're going to get to your calls in just a second. Directed energy technology's been around for a long, long time. I would guess, Judy, the people who could harness this could do just about anything they want, can't they?
Oh, sure. And, as well as psychologically. As it is, just look at how many people saw what happened that day and how many recognized what they saw. That's something that we all need to think about, how easy it is to fool people.
Do you think the planes hitting the building were merely diversions?
As I say, the majority of the buildings turn to dust in midair.
Yeah.
Airplanes can't do that. Real airplanes can't do that, and neither can fake airplanes. So the airplane issue is irrelevant, except to get people to argue were the planes, no planes, planes, no. They go round, round, round in circles, and they forget to look at what happened to the building.
I don't know how long it would take to create the kind of destruction that was created. If you were, let's say, if you're bombarding these buildings or creating the environment to take everything apart, how long do you think it would have to be? And this is just a guess, I'm sure, on your part, but would it be going on for a week, a day, a few minutes?
Oh,
Any
I don't
idea?
guess. I look at the evidence, and the evidence shows just how long it went on. It began with the airplane-shaped holes in the building, and people were leaving the building, and several of them have discussed strange things going on, like the building turning into dust internally before they got out. So the building was being kind of taken apart for the hour or whatever beforehand. It was slightly less than an hour in one building and an hour and a half on the other building.
There has always been questions, Judy, about Building 7, which was not hit by a plane, that some degree may have knocked it over or fell into it. But what would take a building like that down, too? So was this involved as well?
Yes, there's really good evidence on it. I sent somebody on your team a video link.
Yes.
And it shows the building, regular controlled demolition, and then it shows Building 7 going away. And this emergency medical worker is being interviewed with the tower right behind her. Building 7's right behind her. And she's talking away. Barbara Crowley is her name. And she's talking away, and then until she sees people in front of her who are facing the building gasp. And then she goes, whoa, what's going on? She had no idea that the building just dropped behind her. No inkling whatsoever.
I remember that. It was horrendous. It was unbelievable. It was bizarre.
There's no bang, 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 bang you get in a controlled demolition. It was a whisper, quiet descent, and that even was discussed in the NIST report. That it was made virtually no sound. And let me read from my book a testimony of one of the first responders about some of the buildings. This is Michael Ober. He says, "I don't remember the sound of the building hitting the ground. Somebody told me that it was measured on the Richter scale. I don't know how true that is. If the building's hitting the ground that hard, how do I not remember the sound of it?" And he was right there. A lot of people say, no, building 7 is, it was gone because there's very little mass left to come down. What was measured on the Richter scale was only a surface wave. No S wave or P waves. Those travel through the earth. Like if you hit a tuning fork, if you hit a hammer on a rock, that has a pulse wave as well as a shear wave that travels through the earth. If you get up off your mattress in the morning, it recovers. That's a surface wave. And there was only surface waves measured that day. What does that tell you? And for Building 7, that's how they calculate the equivalent on the Richter scale. They said it was the equivalent of a 0.6. That's like a jackhammer. No wonder why people couldn't hear it. The building was really turning to dust all afternoon. You saw all this material just pouring out of one face and one face only from ground to roof for most of the day until near the end. Then it started coming out of one other side.
What does HAARP, if anything, have to do with this?
HAARP, I jokingly refer to as high amplitude advancement of real propaganda, because people throw out that term and they don't know what it means. If you know what it means, you're violating your security clearance by saying anything about it. Most people who refer to it, it's just a term that they know and they throw around. They don't really know what it does. There's certain things that people say that it does, but I look more at what the evidence is rather than theories. And the evidence is of magnetic-electrogravitic nuclear reactions. Nuclear reactions are caused. It's not like a nuke bomb, but it's small kind of nuclear reactions like what you see in cold fusion. It produces tritium well above background levels, but nowhere near what you would get in hot fission. And so it's definitely something strange that went on there, a different kind of technology.
Sure is. Let's take some calls here for you, Judy. Let's go to Norm in St. Louis. Norm, you're back. Welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a regular.
Yes, you are. We got you.
Yeah, I'm connected through social media with Israel, the various Israeli whatever entities like Prime Minister Netanyahu and the idea. Okay, so a couple of years ago after this happened, I seen a video on YouTube. You can go to it. I don't know how I forget how I got to the site, but they basically built a type of a racquetball wall that was maybe 40 foot tall, 40 foot long or whatever, and pretty thick, like 10 foot thick with reinforced with steel. And they shot a cannon, and at first from the straight on angle, you don't really see it too well or whatever. It was maybe a couple 100 yards away. And then as they show it from different angles and sides, it's shooting some sort of a pulse. I'm not exactly sure what, but you can visually see it coming in, and it actually slows down in super slow motion, and it goes through the wall. And as it goes through the wall collapses down and catches on fire, and there's basically nothing there, just like what happened at 9/11, where, you know, everything fell down, but stuff disappeared or whatever. And on the 9/11 thing, I've understood that there was Israeli vans that were pulling up after hours and when they weren't supposed to be there, and things of this nature, and that the person who owned the Twin Towers was a Jewish businessman who just happened to take out an insurance policy a couple of weeks before they went down.
Well, he's the one who said pull it
for terrorists, and including terrorist acts. Just
it's interesting how there's so many things like the pull it statement that get repeated without people stopping to think about it. You tell the fire department to pull it. Well, they're not in the controlled demolition business.
That's right.
They don't go around with sticks of dynamite in their back pocket to check in there.
And what does pull it mean to you, Judy? To me, it sounds like pull it down.
Well, we don't know what the context of what he was saying was. And it seemed like it was edited down to something to mislead people into imagining something else, but that was recorded like a year later. It was a story for the PBS video, America Rebuilds. There's a portion from that. But if you look at it, why would you have somebody telling the fire department to pull it? In terms of controlled demolition, the firefighters wouldn't know how to size up what was going to happen, what was already destroyed and what wasn't, as to where you would put the dynamite. You would need to be able to evaluate the building first. You don't just, toss in sticks of dynamite random, like you do in a video game. It's a whole lot more involved than that. And there's a lot of other statements that are made often, like, "Oh, we got to investigate Ace Elevator because they did an elevator upgrade." All of these statements are just implications on emotions. They don't involve what happened to the buildings. You first have to start out with what happened, because it's so tempting to go with, Your Honor, that I don't know why, how the victim died, but I know that guy did it.
Mm-hmm.
You come to that scenario. But once you look at what happened, the rest falls out.
Would you say, Judy, that those investigators who understand science, like you, went through that rubble, looked at this dust, and probably came to the same conclusions you did, but haven't said anything about it?
Not only that, the contractors on the NIST report, that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they were mandated by Congress to determine why and how the towers collapsed. They didn't. They had their contractors make a model of, a hypothetical scenario.
Next up, let's go to Kathy in Idaho. Welcome to the program, Kathy. You're on with Dr. Judy Wood.
Oh, hi. Hi, George. Hi, Dr. Judy Wood.
Hey,
I
Kathy.
have waited so long for you to be on the air. When you were first on the air with George years ago, I found your book on the internet, and a friend of mine and I went in on it together because I couldn't afford it. And, you know, I consider myself to be a literate layman or laywoman, whatever, and I'm not a scientific person, Dr. Judy, but I understand the English language. And when I read your book and saw the pictures, the meticulous scientific approach that you took in your book, I was just blown away. And, you know, my world was not the same. It was, your book created such a wave in my own life commensurate with the original wave of the 9/11 experience that the trauma that we all went through. When I read your book, I knew that what you're talking about, even though I'm not a scientist, I knew that what you are saying is true. You were looking at the forensic evidence. You were looking at what happened. How did it happen? You weren't looking at the who and the why. And I really respect everything that you have done and your courage that it takes to step out and not only say the things that you did, but my gosh, you took that lawsuit against NIST way high. I mean,
Up to the Supreme Court.
I'm in awe of all the things that you've done, and I thank you from the American people. I thank you for the work that you've done, Dr. Judy Wood, because I know that your work is going to be validated in time by a majority. It may not be right now because of whatever, but too much of what you have said has absolutely come true as the fallout from all of this. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you have done.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's wonderful to know people like you. I was beginning to worry that people who read books are becoming few and far between. And that's part of the problem these days is, you know, with the internet, people just look for a quick fix, a quick, you know, what's the statement? They don't sit and contemplate. And that's why I have the book in printed form, because you sit on your sofa, you read a paragraph, and you look out into space and you contemplate on what you've just read. What are the implications of it? And it's scary.
Well, it is scary, and it's sad, too, at the same time, Judy. And you know, you don't really want to believe this. That's the other issue that I think you have to face, and so many other people who come to their own conclusions. Nobody wants to believe this, do they?
But there's a good side of this. That the technology that was used on that day is undeniable. There's something that can do what was done. But that technology does not need to be used for evil. It can be used for good. It can provide free, clean energy to the world. Think about that. That's what the subtitle of my book means, Evidence of Directed Free Energy Technology on 9/11. I'm trying to express the silver lining in this horrible, awful gray cloud. And it's kind of like when Hiroshima was bombed. Oh, it wasn't a nuclear power plant that bombed Hiroshima.
No, sadly it wasn't.
It was evidence of a technology that could be used to provide energy.
Let's go to Mike in Montreal. Michael, you're up with us. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, George. I totally agree with Dr. Wood on the technology that was used to bring the towers down, although she hasn't been able to seem to give you an explanation on how it actually works. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, I was working with a scientist named Melly Winfield.
His name is Mel Winfield, and he used John Hutchison's work.
Well, no matter how hard you squish a pancake, it still has two sides. Mel Winfield claims that John Hutchison is using his work.
Okay, but it's still the same.
Same work. It's the same stuff.
Same work.
Yeah.
Same phenomenon that I was describing.
Right. It really goes back to Tesla if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty. What is actually happening here is there's a strong nuclear force, there's a weak force, and electrogravitation. You have three forces that hold an atom together. Now, using scalar waves, and you can basically release that strong, the weak nuclear force, release the bonds that hold that molecule together, and it will basically just fly apart into nothingness. That's what brought those buildings down. Scalar waves that released the nuclear bonds between the atoms. It's very effective. I've taken a copper bar, it's rather a steel bar, and placed it into a field being generated by one of these field generators, and the end of it opened up until it was as soft as a kitten's tail, just all loose fibers instead of a solid steel bar anymore, because it had released all the bonds at the end of that thing. So it can be used destructively, it can be used positively, it can be used for free energy. In that particular day, it was used probably by a satellite to bring down those towers, and I'm sure that's what happened.
Well, there's a lot of speculation. I choose to stay away from speculation. It's kind of like, do you speculate on what the autopsy says, or do you do an autopsy? And, instead of performing an autopsy, a lot of people like to speculate and hypothesize and theorize and whatnot. But I think what is important, and I love that call from Kathy, who said even though she doesn't have a scientific background, she understood the book, because that's the way I presented it, as, direct evidence and parallel evidence. And yes, there's quite a bit on Tesla in the book, as well as cold fusion, looking at phenomena, not gizmo, from the Acme weapons store, aisle 17 on the right. I'm looking at what happened to the material, what happened to the building.
All right, we're going to come back with final questions for you, Judy, in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, open lines here on Coast to Coast AM, so get ready for that. But we're going to come back in a moment with final questions with Dr. Judy Wood as we talk about her work. Where did the towers go? Okay, welcome back. Dr. Judy Wood with us. Judy, the reports on 9/11, many people have said have failed to deliver the information that was necessary to tell folks who, what, why, when, and where. Your thoughts on just how that investigation went, I assume, was poor at best on their part?
Yes, that's why I confronted them. I sent them a request for correction, and they didn't make the corrections, of course, and so that's why I filed a federal QTAM case for accountability of the contractors. At least you can't sue a government agency, but you can sue the contractors for fraud, because that's our tax dollars at work. And they were mandated by Congress to determine why and how the towers collapsed, but they didn't determine that. They created a hypothetical scenario. And some of these contractors were from companies that were manufacturers and researchers of directed energy weapons. Isn't that interesting?
If these towers, it sure is, if these towers went down the way you say, what does that tell you about what's happening on this planet?
Well, it just means that the technology exists that people are, holding their hands over their eyes and not looking at.
Abusing?
Well, yeah, it's used for evil purposes, but it could be used for good purposes. And so many people are really concerned with determining, who did it? Where's the weapon? What is the weapon? Determining those things does not stop this from happening again. Okay, you get the guy who pushed the button. There's 10 more in line ready to do it. So the technology exists. That's the important thing here. And the more people recognize that, the safer we are.
Well, I always, have wonderment when you hear stories of, we took out the head of the Eastern Bloc of ISIS, That person's replaced that moment with somebody else.
Exactly. And knowing that this technology exists, for example, if a city gets dustified again, if people say, "Oh, it must have been a nuke," then it's going to continue on and on and on. If you know this technology exists, you say, "Well, let's use it for free energy."
Oh, that'll never happen, Judy. You know that. I wish
Right.
it would.
Right, but if the best way to get back at the people who did this is to say, now we know it exists.
Yeah.
Let's research it. Isn't that the best way?
You had mentioned some of the cell towers. Is it conceivable that with this kind of technology, they tap into those towers as well to focal and pinpoint the energy?
Well, cell phone towers, we just know, this. We don't even need to speculate. Cell phone towers and, the radio towers transmit radio frequency signals. And all you need to do, as we've seen from John Hutchison's work, is interfere it in a static field, which you get from storm systems. And do you remember in, I think it was summer of 2008, we started having these horrendous tornadoes?
Everywhere.
Every year since then.
Tornado Alley in the Midwest here.
Yeah, it really cranked up. Much worse than it had been. There's always tornadoes, but they became mega tornadoes. What happened that summer that made it different? Remember, February 2009 was the switchover date for digital television. So they're putting in brand new radio frequency transmission towers that summer.
Interesting.
And you normally get those storm systems moving through the Midwest. Now you have cleaner, more direct radio frequency signals transmitted through them. You're fixing to mess up, even if it's unintended consequences. You probably remember that incident where the birds fell out of the sky?
Yeah, 2,000 of them.
Yep, that was right. I checked the radar, the weather radar right after that, and a weather system had just moved through.
Huh.
So, this is unintended consequences, perhaps, but it could easily be intended consequences. It could move to that very easily. We have just think about all of this wireless.
Oh my gosh, it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Smart meters.
Yeah, they put one on the back of my place.
Oh dear.
Here we go. Let's take some final calls here for you, Judy. Hey, by the way, I got an email from someone who said that I was roughing you up. I'm not roughing you up, am I?
I don't know. No,
you can handle it.
Yep.
Let's go to Michael in Virginia. Michael, go ahead. You're up with us.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Dr. Wood. It looks like you're talking about a great national security issue, but you're also talking about the silver lining, and I'm appreciative of what you just said. It may have been unintended consequences. Now, George will verify that I've called this program over several years talking about a documentary film on great engineering disasters of the past, which included the Twin Towers, the 1980 storm that almost took down the towers. Now, here's my question, one for you and one for George. We are going to a brokered convention in the Republican Party.
I predicted that, Michael, months ago.
I've said before that George Noory will be asked to serve as vice president. Now, here's my question to Dr. Judy. The vice president is in charge of these matters. No man in America has shown himself to be more courageous in pursuing these questions than George Noory. Now, you know the former governor of Virginia who has run for president in this term, in this cycle.
Gilmore?
He is the highest security, national security expert on the campaign trail. If George Noory becomes vice president,
would you accept his appointment to solve this, well, I'll call it a conundrum right now, because, like you said, it could have been unintended consequences. We're going to need the technology that will stop it from happening accidentally, as it almost did in 1980, and we can save this great republic. And George, will you accept the nomination?
Let's see what happens, Michael. There's. How about that for a political answer?
Oh, that sounds great.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that. Well, there's a lot of work out there. This is a great country, always has been. My father did all he can to make it great, and everybody else should too. And it's kind of frustrating, Judy, to see things that if things happen the way you have concluded, it's sad at the same time.
Oh, the tower's still there?
Yeah. It would have been nice. All those people.
They went away. And I feel that, I kind of made a promise to those people that I would tell their story. I would tell what happened.
Under incredible stress in terms of people truly coming at you. I mean, the emailer earlier thought I was coming at you too hard in the beginning. No, I was just trying to get some answers about this kind of technology. But I would guess they really come at you.
Oh yeah, because they don't either they don't want to understand, and they have their own agenda, or they don't have the ability to understand, and that is the scary part. We have so much information available to us now that people don't realize they need to be able to think, to be able to discern, and there's plenty of rumors available. Like, for example, what's a scalar weapon? Or what's all sorts of, I call it name-dropping trendy terms.
This kind of technology, if used that way, could they also use it in tanks and in rifles, almost like you would use a laser weapon? Could they use this same kind of bombardment? You just point it at a person and poof, they powderize?
Well, as I said earlier in the program, you've heard of tornadoes. Do you think they haven't weaponized a tornado?
Well, there's been some talk that maybe they have.
Right? Would they do that and print it out in the front page of the New York Times?
No.
With the directions?
We'd have to talk about it on a program like this.
Right. But you think about what a tornado does. And you look at the World Trade Center, and that's, matter of fact, some of them, the first responders described it like a tornado coming. They're just the constant roar.
They felt that, yeah.
Yeah, and tornadoes pick people up and move them places. And people were picked up. First responders talked about being picked up and carried a block.
When do you go on speaking engagements or events?
Usually people don't want me.
Okay. All right, so
I do.
When you're there speaking, what kind of reception do you get?
Very good.
Good.
Oh, it feels so good. You feel the warmth of the people in the room. And also, it works two ways. That for them, it's a struggle because it's a painful realization, but we're amongst friends, so to speak. No one's alone. And so being able to talk about it with others, and just the important thing to remember in this is to look at the evidence. The evidence will tell you what happened. If you start theorizing, then you end up ignoring various pieces of evidence, and then you don't know what happened. The evidence will tell you what happened. It's kind of like a autopsy. Either it's conclusive or it's not, and you know what it is that you know that you know that you know. If
the buildings came down from controlled demolition, as some people have theorized, it wouldn't powderize that much, would it? I may have created a new word here.
You wouldn't dustify in the middle of the air. You would have seismic signals that would reflect it, and that didn't happen. You'd have chunks hitting the ground, and you'd have a whole lot of evidence that didn't occur. More than that, you have some very good witnesses of this that were on the second, third, and fourth floor of the North Tower.
Yeah.
In Stairway B. You know, a lot of people say, oh, maybe all the debris got stuffed into the basement. Well, how did it get to the basement and not squash those people? Did it, you know, go up Church Street and make a left on VC Street and then take the ramp down into the basement? You know, how did the debris get from above down to the basement without squashing these people? You know, so that didn't happen. What they did is look up and see blue sky.
How did a hijacker's pristine passport get found in the dust?
Well, that's hearsay.
Come on. Oh, that is.
You trickle out, hints of this and that. I say it's like a magic show where the magician appears to cut a woman in half as in a wooden box.
Yeah.
Well, nobody files murder charges against him because the woman appears at the end. And seeing the woman whole at the end is another piece of data that shows you your assumption earlier is incorrect.
It's a great illusion. John in Springfield, Missouri, you're up with Judy Wood. Go ahead, John.
Yes, sir. It's like enjoy your show. Great bit.
Thank you.
Just to quote a line from Sin City from Mayor Rourke. Once you get people believing things that they know are not true, you've got them by the hand. That's actually not the word hand, is not what he actually used. But I think most people know that 9/11, what happened was obviously was not due to planes crashing into it. I went to an engineering school, and most people that I know of, the majority of them, do not believe that the planes caused the buildings to fall. Those planes that are supposedly civilian planes that look like military carriers that are slate gray. But besides that, I was wondering, do you think possibly thorium, instead of like a uranium-based explosion, could have been used to take the buildings down? Since thorium has no trace, there's lots of it in the United States, and it can also be, it's like supposedly it can be weaponized. I'm just going to get off the line and see what you think.
Happened with the thorium? Did it make a bomb that goes boom?
No. I'm just going to get off the line.
Okay, John. He's gone on it, Judy, but go ahead.
Okay, what's important to realize is, first, what happened? What was the mechanism of destruction? What caused the building to come apart? Was it thermal energy? Was it kinetic energy? Or was it something else? We can eliminate thermal energy because you have all this unburned paper around that people in the building weren't cooked to death. There was no high heat. The trees around didn't burn up. Was it kinetic energy, like a bomb or a hammer or lots of mini hammers, something hitting something hard? Or gravity collapse, it would be kinetic energy.
What about thermite? Wasn't there thermite residue out there?
What thermite is powdered aluminum and iron oxide. What was the building made out of? Aluminum cladding on a...
It was aluminum and steel, yeah.
And it was turned to dust. So what were you going to find in the dust?
You're going to find aluminum.
Aluminum powder, and you're going to find iron oxide, because the iron will rust immediately.
Well, I got to ask you one day about chemtrails, but not tonight. Let's go to Brett in Iowa, first-time caller. Let's squeeze you in here, Brett. Go ahead.
All right. Hey, thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to say I went through a mechanic school and all this other stuff, and I did a lot of research about jet fuel and how hot it burns and if it would actually burn steel, because I had a lot of questions about 9/11. I was only like 14 when it happened. Joined the military when I was 18 because like a lot of people, I didn't ask a lot of questions. I just went along with what everybody said.
Sure, exactly.
And I served 2 tours overseas, and when I came back, I decided that I was time to wake up. I wasn't going to be a sheep anymore, and I did a lot of research about jet fuels and.
Were you shocked with what you finally learned, Brett?
Yeah, I was. I didn't think that our government, I guess, or
somebody, or something,
or something, could do something like that to somebody else. Because I was only like 23 by the time I got out, and I've seen a lot of death. I've dealt with a lot of stuff, but.
I think, truth be known, if this is going to come down as one of the biggest conspiracies of all time. Brett, we're out of time. And Dr. Judy Wood, thank you again for being on the program, and keep up the battle, Judy, all right?
Thank you so much.
Dr. Judy Wood. Now, when I come back in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM, we do this now every week, a couple hours of open lines on Coast to Coast AM. So just about anything goes. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and do follow us on Twitter because we send out information all the time. Well, welcome to Open Lines here on Coast to Coast AM. Just about anything goes for the next couple hours. So how many of you remember the old animated television series? It was produced by a company called Cambria Productions. It was syndicated in 1959. I was just a little guy then. Clutch Cargo. You remember that? Very limited animation. But the lips moved because I think they had like people lips behind them. And it was really weird. But it was a hit. It surprised everybody and went on for a couple of years. It was something else. But I want to talk about some old-time TV shows like Twilight Zone, Clutch Cargo, Fireball XL5, Outer Limits, science fiction theater, in addition to what you want to talk about. So make the call on Coast to Coast AM. And growing up in Detroit, of course, Soupy Sales was a great television program, and he went off to Hollywood to do bigger things, but he was always fun, too. Great old-time television shows. And radio, of course, was the best. It started with those old-time radio shows, probably way before my time in terms of the family gathering around the radio. I was a child of the television era, but those old-time radio shows were something else. And I remember my parents had a Philco radio that I think the Ford Motor Company once owned the Philco company. But those radios of those days were a piece of furniture in your house. I mean, they were truly unbelievable. You know, big wooden cases and everything else. And you know, the family would have their chairs and couches around there, and they just listen to radio shows all the time. But it's amazing how things have changed. You know, now that huge piece of furniture has been replaced with a little smartphone where people can hear things that way. And, of course, your radio, yay, C. Crane, your radio is still there for you, too. You know, I've got the little ones, the big ones, and everything else. Okay, but let's go to the phones, open lines. We'll go to Carol in San Jose, California to get things started, west of the Rockies. Hey, Carol, how are you?
Fine, George, thank you. That wonderful program you had on Friday, April 1st. Your screener assures me that the triplets are for real.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was a prank. I mean, it was April 1st, you know.
It was April 1st, wasn't it? My gosh.
What baffles me totally is that normally when you have someone splitting to form twins or triplets, they're all of the same gender. I mean, it's either both X chromosomes or an X and a Y.
Mm-hmm.
How on earth could one of them be she, that is Elvira, and the other two he, Walter and Bobo? And I have another question.
Yeah, you know what? I've asked some doctors about twins. My father was a fraternal twin.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, his brother, fraternal was not identical. They didn't look anything like each other. But I asked him about that, and he said once in a while you will have a male-female in a twin set in terms of appearance. But that's very, very rare.
The only thing I could figure is that part of the embryo might have gotten hit by X-ray or radiation, but that could be fatal.
Could have been fatal, and would there have been X-ray and radiation in those? Yeah, I guess there could have, because they're 52 years old.
52, early 60s.
Yeah, but that was on April 1st, so that was an interesting show.
Right. But the other thing I was wondering, they said that Walter's head had died, but that Walter was controlling the legs. How do they walk now?
I guess they, you know, it's short-circuited, and they're doing the walking now, and his head, according to them, still receives nutrients and blood, even though his brain's not functioning anymore.
It's just brain dead, but not the other
It's right. He's brain dead. That's a good point.
I suppose it's plausible, some kind of mutation. You know, related to this, a number of years ago, I bought a package of daffodil bulbs, white with little yellow cups, lemon drop variety.
That you would grow yourself.
Right. And 3 of them came out as described. One of them, however, came out all white. Now, that could have been just somebody mistook and put it in the wrong package.
Yeah, right.
However, there was a 5th bulb, which turned out, at first, all white flower, and it branched, and I swear it was one bulb, not just 2 tangled together. The other branch of that bulb came out white with a deeper yellow cup.
Huh.
They were attached. Now, all I can think of is maybe somebody X-rayed a package.
Yeah, that could be. Did you talk to anybody about the triple-headed person?
No.
Because I wanted to know what kind of reaction you might have gotten or anything if you talked to your friends.
Neighbor.
What did they say?
They laughed.
They laughed?
They thought it was a prank, and I did too, and I apologized, but I really thought it was. I fell for one of your pranks a few years ago when you said you were going to put robot announcers, and I didn't think anything of it. I called and said I'd rather hear a live voice, and then a year or 2 later you mentioned that was an April 1st prank, and I thought, oh no, I believed him.
But they are starting to do that now. Can you believe that?
They really are.
Oh, yeah. Have you seen some of the physical robots that they're making these days? They look almost human.
I've heard about these things. There have been some science fiction stories about that.
I mean, would you? Are you married now or not?
No.
Okay. Would you ever have a robot male if it looked just like a human male?
I don't know about that.
See, I think that's going to happen. I think people for companionship are going to be able to buy robots and take them out and go to dinner with them. Of course, it's going to be a cheap date.
Well, yeah, and if they marry, now you're going to have some changes in the laws.
Oh, here we go again.
Are you allowed to marry a robot? I mean, they've had all this to do about same-gender marriages. Can you imagine a human and a robot?
Oh, that's interesting take. Okay, Carol, thanks for the call.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go. Let's go next to Mel in Tucson, Arizona. Mel, welcome to the program.
Hello, George, and thank you so much for having Dr. Judy Wood on your show.
You're welcome.
I cannot believe it has been almost 15 years since that infamous day.
Oh,
and I know she's off the air now.
Where did the time go?
I know. I cannot believe it. It just seems like yesterday. I remember when you started on Coast just after. That seems like yesterday, and it's over a decade now. So
yeah.
I wanted to say I have her book, and it has changed the innocent way in which I used to see the world. And I guess after JFK and 9/11, we're no longer innocent. The American people and the world owe Dr. Wood an immense debt of gratitude. And as a previous caller said, perhaps not now, but in the future, everyone will thank her for her work. So I guess I have a 9/11 question for you, George.
All right.
In your opinion, after doing this for so many years, how do you think 9/11 was covered up so effectively? And as Dr. Wood states in her book, if we have irrefutable evidence, why does it remain covered up? And I'll take your answer off the air. And by the way, since you were talking about the Twilight Zone, Rod Serling was such a genius and a visionary. Thank you, George.
Oh, my gosh, he sure was. I got a friend of mine who's trying to work on an animated Rod Serling movie. That would be amazing as well. Well, my take on 9/11 is this. There's no question in my mind that the 19 hijackers were truly 19 hijackers, that they were involved, and that the 2 planes hit the towers. I'm not sure what hit the Pentagon, quite frankly, because they really haven't found a lot of plane parts. And I do think we had to take down the plane over Pennsylvania. And that's sadly a necessity. The plane was under control of hijackers, and the targets, which would have been the Capitol building or the White House, that they were going to take that plane down and crash it. Those people, those poor passengers on that plane were doomed from the get-go. We had to take it down. I don't know why we just don't admit that, because I think that's important to say that. You know, we had to do what we had to do. Be that as it may, with all that involved, right? The terrorists were involved and the crazed fanatics. I think there was a faction in government that was well aware of what was going on. And was there another group involved with this terrible, terrible moment in our lives and in our history? I think it was. I don't know who they were. I really don't. But they were very influential, very wealthy. They had their agenda, and they did what they had to do. Now let's start with Dr. Judy Wood's thoughts and conclusions that this was a directed energy that took these buildings down too. She's pretty convincing. When you read her book, it's pretty convincing. It's wild, and you may think far-fetched, but it's pretty convincing. I mean, those buildings just crumbled, and Building 7 crumbled, and nothing really hit it. It's weird. All right, before I get to a call, we do take your text questions, and Tom has one way back in L.A. But I can see Tom. I can see a little tiny Tom Danheiser on my computer because we've got this high technology setup. And there he is. There's a microphone in front of him, and I need to take a picture of this and send it to Lex and have him post it so people can see you.
But you're so funny. It's like it's not like you're on Mars.
Well, it's
a few thousand miles
pretty
away.
far. I'm in St. Louis in the cave, yeah.
That is true. We have something from Anderson in Alabama. He texts in, he says, I see the weirdest weather these days, and I want to know if you think that weather patterns get worse on this planet as more and more years go by.
I think we are in a cycle. Whether it's good weather, bad weather, cold weather, warm weather, I don't know. But I think we're in a cycle. This planet changes all the time and will change all the time. And that's what's happening right now. We're in an Earth cycle.
So you think weather will get better and then get worse again?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have great days, bad days. In St. Louis weather, other than a lot of rain since I've been back here, I'm here for about 2 more weeks, has been phenomenal. I mean, springtime in St. Louis and falls are the best. That's why I come out here a lot, to see my kids and see that kind of weather. And don't forget the event that you have produced. June 18th.
Did you see all that snow we missed last month in Denver?
In Denver, when we went to do Beyond Belief?
Yes.
Tom, I got to tell you, we've been lucky dodging the bad weather in Denver.
Yes.
We were the first plane that landed months ago, and we were the first plane to get out before the storms hit. We've been lucky.
Well, we're supposed to get rain tomorrow, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Well, you need it.
Yes,
out
absolutely.
there in California. We've been getting rain every other day here in St. Louis.
Really?
Yep. And you will be here on that weekend producing the show, right?
When we do the stage show, we will.
You're looking forward to that?
Yeah, I am. Are you?
Yeah. Oh, I love these live events. You know that.
They're great.
Get a band for me, and I'm happy.
I would like to do, at some point, every state.
You can't do that in 1 year.
Oh, no, I didn't say in 1 year, but I mean just at some point.
That's a lot. Okay, let me take some more open line calls here. Next up, we go to Stephanie in Fremont, California on the wild card line. Hi, Steph.
Hi, George. How are you?
Good. You driving? Where are you?
I am sitting in front of my house.
Sitting in the car?
Under the stars, yes.
Under the stars. Well, that's great. What's going on?
I'm really sorry that I missed your guest because I had a few questions for her. I'm really wondering the subject about the towers coming down, why somebody just doesn't bring up the obvious that both of these planes took out a major portion of both buildings' infrastructure, and you just cannot expect these buildings to hold up. And I just think her, and I believe it's a theory, is just so far out there. And why isn't anybody ever bringing up the fact that there was not much infrastructure left once the planes went through it to hold it up?
All right, but let me ask you this, though. All that considered, and that's very, very poignant to think about all that. What about Building 7, another huge skyscraper, which wasn't hit by a plane, and it went down the same way? How do you figure that?
I would not even.
Buildings don't go down like that.
Well, it was engulfed in flames. I mean, I remember seeing it that day. It was on fire, every bit of it.
Yeah, but not that much, not nearly the kind of fire that the planes created with the other towers. I mean, it got rubble that got pushed over into it, but not enough to, buildings just don't collapse like that. They just don't go down. And I just think there's something else that we need to look at about all of this.
I wouldn't use Building 7 to try and come up with an answer for the Twin Towers. I think that was a different thing.
Yeah, but it's related to the whole thing. See, my point is those buildings go down. They're hit by planes. Everybody saw that. A lot of people still think, like you do, it's just the planes. But nobody is really saying anything about Building 7. It's almost like it didn't happen. It did happen. The building went down in a rubble. Doesn't make any sense.
Let me ask you, though, if somebody has this superpower, this energy force, and the terrorists doing it, 9/11 was just like an inspiration to them. They would be so eager to use this again. They would have done a dozen 9/11s by now.
We don't think the terrorists had that kind of energy weapon. Somebody else did. Use these terrorists to do what they were going to do. Why
haven't they used it?
That was the front. But why haven't they used it again? That's a good question. They could be saving it for another major episode. But their agenda is probably getting done what they wanted to do in the first place. And that's domination of everything.
They like a high body count, and for them to just stop at 9/11, it just seems ludicrous that if they have this amazing power to take down over 100-story buildings, that they would just stop there and be satisfied. I mean, they want body count. They want to kill lots of people. Why aren't they taking down bridges? Why aren't they taking down more skyscrapers? It doesn't make sense to me, her whole theory. Just because she's in that field, she's come up with this elaborate thing, and it just seems so obvious that these planes took out so much of the buildings and they fell. And if they were pulverized, who knows why they were pulverized? They pancaked all the way down to the ground, but we can't test it. We can't build buildings like that again and have them sit there for 40 or 50 years in age through weather and everything else, and then knock them down with planes again. So it is a hypothesis on her part.
Oh, I think so too. There's no question about it. But look what has happened since 9/11 to this planet. I mean, everything is turned upside down. And if they needed something like that to get things going and to change things, they surely took advantage of it, didn't they?
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of things we're never going to know about 9/11, and it'll stay a mystery, a lot of it, I'm afraid. But if we don't want another 9/11, I say vote Trump.
We shall see. We may have other issues. I got to tell you, that entire primary on both sides is the strangest I have ever seen since I started looking at primaries. It's been a long, long time. I mean, don't forget, I was 13 when Kennedy was killed. That's when I started becoming aware of all of this, who the president was. And Kennedy, for me, was my very first president. Even though I was born in 50, I really didn't know what Dwight Eisenhower was all about. It was really Kennedy. We'll be back. And welcome back to Open Lines here on Coast to Coast. Let's go to Andrew, who is in Del City, Texas. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Good morning, George. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure thing.
I was just thinking about the old TV shows that you're saying about Rod Serling. There was one that came along later that he had. It was Night Gallery.
Night Gallery, the one that was in color.
Yeah, I mean, I saw some of it was just reruns. The Twilight Zone was reruns to me. But when Night Gallery came out, I would get in trouble with my mother for watching it because she didn't want me to watch those kind of shows because they thought it was kind of like creepy or something. But I turned out okay as far as
And I did too, I think.
And also, I don't know if you recall or you have any idea that there was a show back in I want to say the mid-'70s. It was a show called Bring 'Em Back Alive with Bruce Boxleitner.
Bring 'Em Back Alive. I remember the show. I didn't watch it a lot, but I remember the title.
And it was I was fascinated by it because it was based on the real life Frank Buck, and I thought that was really, really interesting because I thought some people, they kind of forget about some of the famous people that came along earlier in our history, especially during the early 20th century.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so that kind of since it was, I think they based the show out of like Singapore or something like that.
And it didn't last too long, I don't think.
No, but I thought the stories were rather interesting, even for a young guy like I was. I just liked it a lot, and I kind of like thinking about you were talking about the radios, the old.
Oh, they were great pieces of furniture.
Oh yeah, we had a large. Amazingly enough, we had a Zenith cabinet radio, and then my mother bought us back in this was the late '60s, our first color TV, which was also a Zenith, and that thing was a huge thing in itself. It was really neat.
You'd see little greens and blues and think, "Oh, this is so cool."
Oh yeah, and then when turning it off at night or something, to sit and watch the screen as it, the little dot until it finally.
And do you remember television stations would go off the air and play the Star Spangled Banner?
Oh yeah,
and then the test pattern would show up.
Oh yeah, I remember that. It was I would get in trouble for staying up so late or even sneaking out to just go into the living room to watch a little bit as the national anthem. My grandfather kind of chuckled because my mother was raised me with my grandmother and my grandfather, and they raised me to be rather patriotic. I never served. I wish I had, but I never served. But every time that the national anthem would play at night, whenever I snuck in, my grandfather caught me one night. I was standing in front of it with my hand over my heart, and he told my mother about it. She said, "If you ever stay awake again to do that, just remember that you have to say, sing along with it instead of just standing there."
I love it.
I started singing along. I can help myself. I just and I do, even at ball games when they do that, I do the same thing. I take my hat off and put it over my heart, even if I'm just watching on TV.
All right, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I want you to sing a little bit of this for me. I bet you remember it. Now, it's improper to interrupt you to tell you to stop in the middle of it, but I'm going to do that. But give us a few bars.
I'm kind of shocked. Okay. Oh, say, can you see by the stars? By the dawn's early light. Yeah, I'm all.
How many stars have choked singing that song at a ball game and they forget the words?
Oh, yeah, I know that there's been dozens of them. And the thing about it is that it doesn't matter how bad that they mess it up. It still, it stirs me, as an American, because I feel very patriotic. No matter how bad they mess it up, I'm still in awe of what kind of a country we have.
You got that right. No matter what we're going through, it's the people, Andrew, like you and so many others that make this country great. So, thank you for what you do.
Yeah, and as far as this election thing, it's silliness, it's crazy, but I tell people to just vote your conscience, vote for your heart, and we'll make it through it.
Yep. Absolutely, because the one thing they cannot do is take our hearts away. They can't do it. They can try. Oh, they can try, but it's not going to happen. Brian is in Ohio. Welcome to the show. Hi, Brian.
How you doing, George?
Good, thank you.
I've got a theory about some time and the expansion, and I think it's just an illusion. And actually, your psychics and your the people that live past lives, I think, is actually the key to it.
Really? Okay, tell me.
Well, everybody sits there and thinks about the expansion of the universe. We're expanding. I don't think we're expanding. I think what is actually happening is that the universe is going so fast, it's actually stopped.
Is it coming back down? Is it contracting?
Well, it's not exactly contracting. What it is all the energy, like people, their beings, their sense of thing. What happens is it all we're basically like catching up to it. Basically, like it's past the speed of light is what's happening. And what happens is as soon as it gets to the point to where it's frozen, what will end up happening is it'll actually slow down, and all that energy, all that information of everybody's thinking, thoughts for past lives and everything, it'll recycle itself.
Interesting.
And what ends up happening is people from their past lives and everything, the same DNA and everything like that. That's why they can recall anything from past and actually some from future, because time is irrelevant.
Well, listen to this possibility too. If what you say is true, the universe just will stop or has stopped. What's on the other end? What's at the end? I mean, can you?
There is no end. You will not. You won't, because the universe itself is like. Just think of us as like a projector. The universe itself is going so fast that it's literally stopped. So speed, time, expansion is all an illusion. You're thinking that you're expanding, but it's not really. It actually stops, and it will actually just basically slow itself down and then reproduce itself again. So there's actually no end. There's no. It would be basically like a wave on, like a leaf on water. The universe has went so fast that it stopped, just like black holes. The information is all there. It's just froze.
It's amazing just to think about the possibilities, isn't it?
Right, but I mean, honestly, I think that's why people for past lives can sit there and recall why there's psychics and stuff, because that information is already there. There's no such thing as past. There's no such thing as present. And there's no such thing as the future. It's all one entity.
You may be very right on that. I know Michio Kaku has said we're like living inside of a balloon, and as it expands, but still there's something on the outside of that balloon. That's what I just can't put my mind to accept. Tom, you've got a text for us back there. What do you have?
We have something from Margie in Montana. I'm studying the subject of space, and I find the Challenger disaster really disturbing. These kind of disasters should not happen. Can you please give us your take?
Well, that's sad, but these disasters do happen. When you deal with technology, you're going to have things that go wrong. And the Challenger and Columbia, things went wrong. And that's the sad part of a space program or anything else. I mean, look at how many car pieces don't function right, or airplane parts that don't function right, and planes crash. It happens.
But let me ask you something, though, because they really knew with those O-rings that they shouldn't have done that launch, and they knew, and people know they knew. Why don't they go after people that do that?
Yeah,
I mean, that's wrong.
If they could name specific people who knew, of course they should go after them. But, they didn't. Maybe they were cutting corners, trying to save money.
But
I remember watching that on television. It was horrible.
But it's frustrating that, like, almost everybody, at least everybody I talk to, thinks, yeah, they knew. and yet we don't do anything about it.
I know it. Okay, Tom. Is Skype working back there?
Skype is working.
Okay, folks. Skype George 97313. That's the number. Brian, thanks for your call. Next up, let's go to Wayne in Lakewood, California. Wayne, you're on the air.
Top of the morning, George.
You too.
As we're reminiscing about old radios, can I reminisce a little bit about that too?
You sure can.
You know, I was thinking back to my childhood when I was still in the crib. My mom had one of those big Zenith cabinet radios that the gentleman was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It had the magic eye in the middle.
Yep.
Tuning it in, to get in it right on spot and that. And it had shortwave radio and everything else. And it was really her companion because my father was a railroad conductor and he was only home like 1 or 2 days a month. Otherwise, he was always on the train. And so that radio was on all the time, and she was a good Christian lady listening to the Christian radio station. And I can remember a couple of those old preachers today and their voices. And do you know that one of them is still on the radio today?
No. How old is he?
Well, let me tell you this little story because they just reviewed it in the last couple of days. He started in the radio with one of his professors that had a radio show in the 1930s. And he just finished his 9th program going through the Bible in 5 years, and they're starting the 10th program. It's called Through the Radio Bible.
Huh.
His name is J. Vernon McGee. Now, he's been with the Lord for about 15 years now, but he's the widest listened to minister in the world, all over the world.
With his radio show.
With his radio show, through the Bible radio, in 5 years. It takes 5 years to go through the complete Bible in detail, and it's amazing.
Do people call in too?
Yeah, people call in too, sure. Yeah, people call in and the questions, to the...
What do you ask a minister or a pastor?
Well, I think probably the most important thing is how can you be sure of your salvation? How can you be sure to go on to heaven? And I think I asked that question once to one of your guests when he was on the radio there, a fellow from Texas. Trying to remember his name now.
Is that Alex?
He wrote the book. What was it?
Jim Mars.
No. He's a minister. And I know you don't interview that many ministers on the radio.
No, we don't. I can't remember his name. But.
Yeah. Anyway, getting to where I was going, I guess, I have one of these old radios in my house today. I bought it from a local antique store, and I thought it was a real cool-looking cabinet. The wood's beautiful and everything, and it's a 1928 freshman president.
Huh.
And when I did the research to look it up, I found every other model except for the president. I found out that this radio in 1928 cost $20 more than you could buy a brand new Ford for.
Wow.
Yeah. Huh. And you remember those first TVs that came out, they were over $1,000, those first RCA.
And do you remember
TVs.
the TV repairman that had to come to your house in order to replace the tubes?
Several times, 6-year-old TVs, GEs and that, yeah.
And the worst thing he could have said was, I have to replace the picture tube.
Yeah, right. Because that was the special.
The little tubes you didn't care because they always had them. They had packages of them.
Absolutely. Well, I've got a request for a couple of special guests. The one I've never heard, and that was the one that your lady was talking about earlier that had all that weird stuff that would melt metal and that. The guy from Canada, what's his name, starts with an H?
The Hutchinson?
Yes, Hutchinson, right.
I think he's in the United States.
Well, I from what I remember, and reading about it on the Internet years ago when I read about he had a machine you could shoot down into the ground and it would kind of make the ground invisible.
Yeah, I thought he was in Kansas, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and then I don't know if the CIA's gotten to him or what to make him shut up because I know he has some wild stuff going on. And then David Adair, the young...
it's been a while since I had him on.
Oh, yeah, right. And
Rocket Man.
Yeah, the Rocket Man that made a miniature nuclear fusion engine rocket in 1971. And I think this is where the Air Force took the fusion engine and put it in their miniature shuttlecraft that we've talked about that are going all over the space. going throughout all the planets with their secret space program.
Yeah, I'll turn the staff loose on that, and we'll go get him. That should be fun. Let's go to Bill in Pennsylvania. Hey, Bill, welcome to the show.
Good morning, George. How you doing?
Good. Hope you are too.
Before I get to the subject of my call, I was always a big fan of the show Cold Shack. Remember Cold Shack?
Yep, sure do.
I love that show. But
that was with Darren McCavern?
Yes, it was.
Yep.
And I think his boss's name was Tony.
Tony,
the
right.
Editor of the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the subject of my call, you had a gentleman on that was saying that there was big cats roaming south central Pennsylvania.
Right.
Well, my son and I witnessed one last September. Now we have a English Mastiff at home. His name's Dune. This cat was double the size of our English Mastiff, not height-wise, but weight-wise and length. We went down the very next day where we saw it at, and it was in the middle of the road. It was crossing the road when we were driving north.
Did you see the eyes, Bill? Were they red?
Yes, we did see the eyes, and they were red.
Yep.
I actually seen it for approximately 9 seconds, 10 seconds. My son seen it for about 5. He was playing on his phone, doing whatever. But he looked up and he said, "What?" He said, "What was that?" I seen the eyes. They were red. But what had me was the size of it.
Huge.
It was 7 feet 4 inches from what we guessed. We went down the next day and measured from the roadway, from the middle of the road to where we thought the head was, and then not the tail, but the end of the body.
Yeah, that was it. See, and I think what you're looking at is a creature from another dimension. The red eyes, that throws me. We're going to come back in a moment with more open lines on Coast to Coast AM. Well, welcome back. Still another hour to go of open lines here on Coast to Coast. You've heard some of the things we've been talking about. Whatever's on your mind, check in with us, and we'll get to your calls. Hey, I'm in Cincinnati this coming weekend at the Victory of Light event. It's a great event, some great guests. I get to meet my buddy Rosemary Ellen Guiley will be there on my panel, as a matter of fact. Full information at coasttocoastam.com. Those of you in the greater Cincinnati area, come in from Cleveland or wherever you want to, and let's have a great weekend there before I come back here. I'll be back here for a couple weeks. Then we have to do our Beyond Belief television show in Denver, and then it's back to Los Angeles for a while, and then it's into May. Can you believe that? Just where did this year go, my friends? Where did it go? Let's go to the phones. Next up, we go to Mike in Ohio. Welcome to the program, Michael.
Hey, good morning, George. How you doing?
I'm good. I hope you are, too.
I'm good. I'm really good. I just want to talk to you about your guest, Judy, and what do you think about the technology behind that? That something like that could happen to the world?
Well, I know that Tesla was working on it during his time, and that was a long, long time ago. It's very conceivable we have that kind of technology available today. Was it used for the buildings? I don't know. She's convinced it was.
I feel we do. I mean, I feel that, like Newton and Tesla and Einstein, if they would have been able to figure out this technology today, they'd be sent back to kindergarten.
Yes.
But I don't think it could have resolved until we had the technology to control it with the way computers are and electronics are today. I looked into it about 10 years ago, and I think I realized we have the technology.
But why don't they use it more often?
I think they use it in that instance to prove to the world that we have it. And Israel knew it. I mean, that's just my theory, that Israel knew it. They possibly were going to say something to somebody else about it, and we had to make a pact with them, and then that's why Building 7 came down.
Yeah,
I don't know the reason why the buildings came down, but I knew whether it was going to be from the terrorists Like, I thought the terrorists, okay, they put the planes in the building.
Yeah, they did that. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, they thought they were going to fall, okay, and then they realized, well, wait a minute, the buildings aren't going to come down. And then they did what they did.
Or they already had it, or they had it planned. The terrorist bit was just the front show. Yeah. Meanwhile, they had all their other weaponry ready to go. And look what's happened to this planet since that tragedy.
Yeah, there's a professor in England, in Cambridge. I feel that he understands about that technology. But it could be used for great good or terrible evil.
Yeah, just like she said.
And hey, my TV show that I liked in the 60s, 70s.
Which one was that? Hee-Haw?
Yeah. I loved it when they would come on the wall, they'd open the windows or the letters or whatever and tell their jokes and the comedy behind it. And, I want to say that because of Merle Haggard passing.
Oh, we lost a giant there. If you're into country music, you had to be into him.
Yeah, definitely. I really liked that show when I was younger.
Hee-haw. Yeah, they did pretty well. Hey, thanks, Mike. Let's go next to Lady in Alaska. Hello, Lady.
Well, good morning, George.
Morning to you. It's been a while.
Oh, it's been a long time coming. Hey, you had a gentleman that called in tonight about James Vernon McGee.
Yes.
The Bible. Okay, I'd like to tell him that McGee passed over December of 1988, and I think that the guest that he was referring to was Chuck Missler.
Chuck is still around, still kicking. Glenn Kimball passed on, but Chuck's still around.
About one that passed over. And also, you've been talking about the Shemitah.
Shemitah.
Yeah, nobody's thinking about it, but in 1967, June the 6th, right? That was the 6-Day War.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, it's going to be 49 years, right? And the year after that will be the Jubilee of 50. So this year, it's a Shemitah on that. And if you go 2 more years, it's going to be 70 years for Israel.
That's right.
And everybody in America has celebrated Easter already, but Passover ain't until the 23rd of April.
It's coming up. That's right.
Well, I want to thank you for taking my call, and I'm glad you're doing good.
Thanks, lady. You too. Alaska. Next up, we go to Ed in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hey, Ed, go ahead.
Thanks for taking my call. Listen, I just wanted to touch base with you and go down memory lane for a few minutes on the Twilight Zone episode.
Oh, sure.
The old radio shows from back in the day.
Love them.
See, I think I'm probably just a year older than you, but I grew up watching Twilight Zone, Night Gallery, Outer Limits. There was one called Majestic Theater that was out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And, of course, back in those days, you had a lot of the old Westerns and stuff like that kind of dominated the airwaves, too, when TV first came out. We got our first TV in 1954. But, George, I can remember when I was about 2 years old, remembering my grandmother listening to soap operas on the radio.
That's right.
If we ever had a TV. That was probably back about 52.
That's how that evolution occurred into television.
Absolutely. And, and a buddy of mine, and I, too, he has an old console radio from the 1930s, stand-up console radio, and he used to listen to Coast on that thing. Now, he tells me Coast to Coast was on the air back in the 70s, but I argued that point with him and told him I thought it came out in the 80s. But he used to listen to some kind of show back in the 70s on that old console radio, and it was the same similar format.
He listened to Long John Nebel out of New York.
You think that's where it was from?
Yep.
Because he'd lay there in bed at night, and he would listen and he'd tell me about all the stories he'd hear,
Yep, that was it.
George, I've got an old radio that my wife, before she passed away, her dad was in World War II in Germany, and he brought a radio back from Germany that supposedly, now, I have no documentation to prove this, supposedly was Adolf Hitler's radio.
Wow.
It was a Philco radio, and it's supposed to have an external speaker with it, which didn't come with it, but he brought that back from Germany. Now, if you knew Sharon's dad, he's not the kind of guy to BS with people, if I can use that word.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He was straight up, no-nonsense type person. He brought the radio back from Germany and just said this was Adolf Hitler's personal radio. He stuck it in the basement of the house.
How do you get it?
Well, I don't know. That's what I don't, I never really had a chance to find out from him how he managed to get it back into the country. But you see, it's not uncommon during that time. Soldiers, a lot of them, brought back souvenirs, and stuff like that. That went on, that was pretty commonly done. But how he got it back into the country, I don't know, because it's a rather bulky item, But,
Boy, if he could authenticate that, it would be worth a fortune.
Well, I've got the radio now. Now, Sharon, my wife, passed away of cancer 5 years ago, and I had her bring the radio over here. Now, she had her own house over in Sand Springs. Of course, I had my house.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Sharon, because the radio was down in the basement collecting moisture, and I said, Sharon, my gosh, go get that radio and bring it over here so something don't happen to it. Because some plumbers worked on her house one time, and her dad had thousands of dollars worth of coins he had saved since World War II.
Oh, no.
And the plumbers got off with all that, right?
No.
Oh, yeah. Of course, she was naive about it, or just didn't give it a thought,
Yeah.
But I'm surprised they didn't get off with that radio. So I convinced her she needed to bring the radio over here, and I was going to take it down and get it restored. But, cosmetically, it's better not to restore the absolute finish on them unless they're just completely totaled out. The radio's really in pretty decent shape. It needs a new rope. On the old tuner on those old radios, they got like a rope tuner around them.
A heavy piece of string, wasn't it?
Exactly. And that needs to be replaced, and it needs to be cleaned up. But I would suppose it would probably still work with a little work on it. And I thought I might do that, get it restored in memory of her dad, and Sharon.
How cool is that?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Great piece of furniture, too.
Oh, yeah. But the Twilight Zone, man, I love that. Hey, George, being without eyesight, I've got all my entertainment from the old 1940s movies, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, everything that I seen when I was sighted, grew up with. I plug that stuff in all the time and listen to it. I've got my own entertainment selected. I've got 300 aviation movies because I'm an aviation buff. That's one of my hobbies, right, growing up.
What do you do, Ed, when you get bored? What do you do?
George, I never stop. Every room in my house you go into, there's a radio. When you hit a light switch, a radio comes on. Every room you go to. And when I go to my computer room, of course, I work out with weights, exercise, try to stay fit.
Good for you.
I'm a very hyper individual. I've got to be doing something all the time. And when I was working, I worked 2 jobs. Not because I had to, but just because I had that kind of energy. And I used to restore sports cars. I was heavy into MGs and Austin Healey's and stuff like that.
Really?
Oh,
Boy.
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I don't think I've seen an MG, Ed, in God knows how long.
Well, I drove I had one that I drove for 10 years, bought another one, drove it for 5 or 6 years, had an Austin Healey that I drove. I had a friend that ran a restoration shop, and we had several MGAs in there, 1958 through 1960 MGAs. But I think I've owned about 4 or 5 MGs and about 4 Austin Healeys and a Sunbeam Alpine. And the first car I ever owned was a Morris Minor. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a little English car. It's a little sedan. And I think I bought each one of them for $50 a piece, brought them home.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Of course, this was back in, 1967.
But still, $50.
Yeah, $50. I pulled them home.
Buy 50 of them.
Yeah, well, George, I swapped them off for 2 beautiful sports cars, 2 little Austin Healey Sprites. I swapped them off for them. And, but, George, I was always busy doing something. If they'd have had Ritalin when I was a child, I'd have probably...
They would have put it on you. How did you go blind, Ed?
Well, George, I got hit in the eye with a rock when I was 7 years old, and it destroyed the eye instantly. Now, they tried to save the eye. Now, back in 1957, that's when that happened. Matter of fact, it was May of 57. They didn't have the technology they have today, okay? And what happened was it destroyed that left eye immediately. They tried to save it without having to remove it. And in the process of doing so, in about a month's time, the other eye started getting blurry. Now,
that's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. And I didn't understand it. Of course, I'm just 7 years old, so I'm not really understanding what's going on. So in about a month's time, the other eye started going bad on me, so they rushed me off to the hospital, and the doctor, they didn't discuss nothing with me. Of course, I'm just a kid. What are they going to tell a kid, right? Well, they had to remove the other eye, and that's what they told my dad, that the other eye would have to be removed, the damaged eye, in order to save the good eye.
It was sucking from the good eye.
Yeah, it was an autoimmune thing. Something about my immune system would not... I don't fully understand it. To this day, I don't completely understand it.
But you're totally blind now.
Oh, I can't tell, but I can't even see a doorway. I can't.
So the other eye went anyway.
Oh yeah, but both eyes are artificial.
And let me ask you this, and it's going to sound strange, but
No.
when you have an artificial eye,
Right.
it looks like an eyeball, right?
Oh yeah, it's plastic.
And what do? They just pop it in your eye socket?
No, I pop it in and out myself and clean them.
You take it right out and clean it?
Yeah, and clean them.
And you just have like a hole there?
Yeah, where the eye used to be. Well, see, there's a socket in there. Well, first of all,
How do you know you've put it in with the pupil facing the right way, for example?
well, you have to pay attention to the shape of the eye. When they make the eyes, you have to pay attention to the shape of it and familiarize yourself. When you pull it out, you've got to remember. When you've got it in your hand, you got to remember the shape of it and which part of the shape goes where.
Would it fit anyway?
No.
Okay, so you like feel around and you know you know what the front part of the eye is.
Well, you can get it crooked, but you see now, the eye that I went blind in when the World Trade Centers came down, that's how long my eyesight lasted until the World Trade Centers came down. The eyeball itself, the original eyeball, is still in there, but it's like a basketball. It just deflated.
Okay. Now, when people look at you, do they know you've got phony eyes?
Well, I guess they look pretty good. I mean, the lady that made them for me, there's a lot of people, I guess, that have to wear them.
How much do they cost?
Well, they're about $10,000 a piece. And the lady that made them for me, she said, "What color eyes do you want?" I said, "Well, as long as we're selecting color, I'll go for blue." You know.
Yeah, but now they don't move, right?
Oh yeah, they move.
I mean, so if you wanted to look up, let's say, you can't see, but if you wanted to look up, would the eyes go up?
Yeah.
Wow.
Here's the thing. Here's what a lot of people don't understand about blind people. Now, okay, for one thing, people that have been blind all their life have no concept of eye contact with people, okay? They have no concept about what anything looks like. I got a couple of lady friends that I met after I lost my eyesight that I was hanging out with for a while, and they helped me get used to being blind, right? Okay, well, anyways, so I was talking with Diane. Diane says, "Well, Ed, it must be tough on you, the fact that you can't see anymore, and you've always been so on the move and worked all these years and stuff like that." And I said, "Well, Diane, I've got a lifetime of memories because I grew up knowing that I'd be blind someday, and I pushed the envelope, George. I lived life to its fullest my entire life."
And that's the way you should.
Yeah, absolutely. It only comes around one time.
That's right.
And Diane, well, see, she never had that privilege. She grew into this world in darkness, and so she's never been able to see the things that I've seen and enjoyed. So I told Diane, I said, "Well, Diane, I disagree with you." I said, "I've had a lifetime of memories. I'm not mad. I'm not bitter about it."
One quick question, Ed, then I got to run.
Okay.
What's the one thing you will always remember seeing?
Oh, man, there's so many things, George. Oh, gosh. Well, aviation is my true love. Okay, I used to go to air shows all over the United States looking at vintage aircraft. And as far as physical things that you would actually see with your eyes, I guess it's my love for aviation and going to air shows and enjoying looking at all those aircraft. And I'm nuts over aircraft and aviation, George. And I guess that's the one thing I would probably miss. George, I still collect model airplanes.
I love it. Okay, I got to run, Eddie, but you keep in touch.
Oh, yeah, George. All right. Have a good evening.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating, huh? $10,000 each for artificial eyes. Tom, you've got a text for us.
Yeah, he sounds like a neat guy, by the way.
Yeah, full of energy.
Justine from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm optimistic that things will get better no matter who becomes our new president. What I wanted to know is, who has been your favorite president that has served in your lifetime?
Well, I was really too young to say Kennedy was my favorite, so I don't know. Nixon had some strengths. He had some attributes. Watergate killed him, of course, but the guy's foreign policy was magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
Johnson, I was really never a fan of. Never a fan of his. I was only, 14 years old when he was 13, actually, when he was president back in '63. So I was never a fan of him. Nixon, Carter, not really. Ford, Reagan, I liked Reagan. I thought Reagan did a good job. Senior Bush, nah.
It's hard to pick, huh?
Clinton,
like a good one.
Nah.
Yep.
The other Bush, nah.
Yeah.
President Obama, probably just Reagan, I think.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I didn't miss any, did I?
No, I think you got them all. Well, in your lifetime.
In my lifetime. So, how about you?
Probably Reagan. Probably Reagan. You know, for as long as I can remember, it's always the worst of the...
plus you're an L.A. boy.
Yeah, you vote for the better of the two evils. You know, that's as much as I can remember.
I always used to do my Reagan impressions.
Go ahead.
Well, Nancy and I are going to build a Star Wars program. Well, how was that?
Okay, now do Kennedy.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
You have a much better Kennedy.
That's not bad, is it?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Well, we'll be back. On our next Coast to Coast program, split show for you for the first couple hours. Scott Portzline joins me after we do some of our news roundup of the day, and we're going to talk about, is ISIS targeting nuclear power plants? And then psychic Anthony Card joins us. We're going to talk about the life of Harry Houdini. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, welcome back. Final segment here of Open Lines on Coast to Coast. Let's go to Jake in Salt Lake City on the Skype line. Hey, Jake. How are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good. Good to have you with us.
So I called in because I'm an audio engineer here in Salt Lake City. I teach music production.
Oh, great.
So what I'm calling in about is frequency, waves in general.
Mm-hmm.
We had a gentleman call earlier. By the way, I listen to your show every single night, religiously pretty much.
Great, thank you.
He talked about the universe and sort of his idea, there's no past or present. Remember that guy? He is what inspired me to call. My big theory on the universe is the Big Bang happened, and so everybody says, kind of like this, the moon, I explain this to all my students about sound. The moon goes around the Earth. That's a big wave. The Earth goes around the sun. That's a big wave.
Mm-hmm.
Our heart beats. The water cycle, day and night. Death and life. It seems to be that everything in nature is just a wave of some sort. So basically, the idea is that fractals are infinite, and so that being said, everything must just be a wave.
But I wonder how, Jake, did all this happen? That's the big question.
Yeah, you're right. That is the big question. But fractals are never ending, and they don't have a beginning either, it seems, so it might be beyond us. Maybe that's the whole thing, is that it's just past our realm of...
Well, it's an interesting theory, but I'm convinced that the cosmetic makeup of the universe is the same throughout the entire universe. All the principles work the same, no matter what solar system you might be in. Let's go to Bonnie from somewhere on Coast to Coast. Hey, Bonnie.
Hi, George. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I appreciate it. I wanted to ask you, have you ever been to a study?
A study?
C-SETI?
C-SETI. No, I haven't physically been there, no.
Okay. Well, I went there last July, and I met Randy Kay.
All right.
There. And first of all, just to touch on the persons or people that have come on your show talking about robotics and, how it's going to be in the future, or it might be. It already is.
Oh, it is.
I mean,
yeah.
Absolutely. You people that, the movie Terminator was absolutely true. It's not science fiction. It's happening now, and it's very everywhere. You'd be astounded but Randy, did show us that he is part robotic. And he was, talking about, some of the ways that they do it and how, they can clone a part in just minutes and, even organs, in just minutes. And I said, well, geez, gosh, that would help so many people. He said, yeah, but they're never going to know about it. It's just only very select people that they will do that to or for. But I have not been able to reach him for a long time, and neither has anybody that I know that knows him. And I wonder if you have heard, anything or, at all about him, his whereabouts, because I guess I'm a little concerned. Nobody's really been able to reach him for a while.
Nothing on the web about him?
I'm sorry, George?
Nothing on the website about him?
Well, not that I've, been able to find. And certainly, people that have his cell phone number, we're just getting messages that say,
That's weird.
voice box is full for months. And
That doesn't sound good.
Yeah, people that know him pretty well haven't really been able to reach him. So I just thought I'd put a shout out and just find out, if he could call, if he's out there anyway. I'm just concerned about him. But also, I did some research, and I don't know if you know this or not, but I just happened to put in John Teeter's name at one point. And
the alleged time traveler.
Right. Yeah, and I did a search on him just to see what was out there. And there are actually two John Teeters in the country, and one was born in the 60s and one was born in the late 90s, and they both live within about an hour of the new NSA facility, which I thought was interesting.
Now, the John Teeters that we've known, according to their family attorney, was a little boy. He was, I think, from Florida, but they moved to like Nebraska or Omaha, something like that.
I don't buy it. I mean, I think it would be more in line with maybe the stuff he knew, whatever, that he would be working for NSA. Certainly that he was in Utah. I thought that was interesting. There were no others in the country, and
right.
I did the search back like 3 years ago and found that, it was interesting that there were two of them, and they were right in Utah, right next to that new facility. So, there's a ton of other things I'd like to talk about. I know you don't have to probably have time here today, but if you could just put the word out to anybody if they have seen Randy, we would love to hear from him, make sure he's okay.
I think it's weird that nobody knows what has happened to him.
Yeah, and then he's just his cell phone's not really reachable right now.
That alone is weird.
Yeah. So. But listen, I appreciate your taking my call,
All right,
and
Bonnie.
I'll be calling back soon.
Thank you very much. Tom, last text of the night. What do you have?
From Bobby in Connecticut. You guys will love this. I went to my neighbor's cremation the other day.
That's fun. Let's go to a cremation.
I wasn't ready to see the process, and it made me sick. I'm curious if you know anyone that has been cremated, or would you ever consider going like that yourself?
My father was cremated. That was his wish. And
really?
And so that's what they did with him. Mom's got his ashes at home in Dearborn, and that's where he is.
Do you see it, like when they do it?
Yeah, I mean,
there,
no,
right?
No,
you don't.
No, you don't see that. You don't even know what's going on.
Well, this guy apparently did because he got sick.
I mean, once the funeral's over, they take them, and that's it. So be it. Would I do it? I've got this weird thought about death. This is my theory. This is kind of scary.
Go ahead.
When you die, you're still functioning. Your mind functions. This is like a Edgar Allan Poe book.
Oh, that's creepy.
This is a Stephen King book. That everyone who dies, this is assuming there's no afterlife, nothing. But when you die, you're still entombed in your body, but you can't move. So you're in this casket. The lights are out. You're fully awake mentally, but you can't move because your body doesn't function. The mind lives forever.
You come up with this.
Isn't that horrible?
It's like that movie. Which was he went into heart surgery or something, and he felt everything. Remember, because the anesthesia didn't work.
What was that movie about? Drink the coffee, Jeff?
Oh, come on. Yeah.
With,
The Vanishing.
Yeah.
Great movie.
With Jeff Bridges.
Jeff Bridges,
right?
yeah.
It was
Where he's buried alive.
Buried alive. That's it. That's my theory that I won't really believe, but that's my theory of death.
So you're sentenced forever? You're lying there forever, buried, thinking?
Yes, forever. The mind goes on forever. You're in this casket.
Man.
To everybody. Isn't that horrible? What a movie that would be.
Where do you come up with these?
Crazy.
So when you're cremated, then what happens?
It's done. It's over. You don't have that anymore.
And you feel the heat though, because your mind is active.
No, you don't have the sensatory from the body.
Yeah, but your brain controls everything on your body.
It's not a brain. It's not your brain. It's your mind that is not connected to the brain.
Wow. That's going to keep me up.
I love it. Let's go to, speaking of things, when are you flying out to Cincinnati?
To Friday morning.
All right, I'll see you out there that night.
You got it.
We've got Jimmy Church filling in Friday night. Good old. I was on Jimmy's show today. Had a great time doing that. Good. I had a fun time. I was on for an hour.
What'd you guys talk about?
Fade to Black. And we talked about everything. Coast to coast, how I started, what's going on. And he had fun doing that. So back to the phones we go with the time remaining. Roy in Iowa, it's your turn. Hi, Roy.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. How about you?
I'm fine. I'm
Good.
glad I made it.
Me too. What's up?
Well, I have a comment about tonight's show
Okay.
with Dr. Judy Wood. And, she didn't, or none of you guys was talking about how it could have been delivered because you don't know, but there's an interesting video on YouTube called 9/11 Eyewitness Hoboken, right?
Okay.
And the video was filmed by this internet newsman from the Hoboken Pier.
All right.
And it shows choppers flying over the towers. And
before
they're not there.
Before the planes hit it, or after?
After the planes hit it, before the collapse, and they're not there rescuing people. And it appears like white beams shooting down from the choppers.
Really?
This is on YouTube. This is on YouTube. You can see this. And I was just wondering if maybe that was that directed energy weapon.
Interesting.
And I just wanted to get on there and for your listeners and you and if Dr. Judy Wood still listening, could check this out, and maybe that's how they delivered the attack, that started off on
the
collapse. Also, I found another video showing the debris of World Trade Center, World Trade Center 7 from above, and the very center of it was really pulverized, or what did Dr. Judy Wood called it?
Powderized.
Powder, whatever she called it, the center of it, the debris was really just demolished, where the outside chunks were bigger.
Yeah.
And it looked like something, like a death beam hit it from above, and these are just videos to check out on YouTube that.
All right. Can they Photoshop some of that? I wonder if they can, to play around. I hope not. Michael in Long Island in New York. Hello, Michael.
Hello, George. How are you today?
Good. I'm doing fine.
I just wanted to share my anecdote about 9/11 because I was there. I was a volunteer for American Red Cross.
Okay.
I don't know anything about dustifying that she talked about. I mean, I'm not a scientist. My only take on it is if the technology exists and was used, it wouldn't be long for other governments, just as evil as the government that used it, to get a hold of it. So we have, I think in political science they call it countervailing powers. So one evil outdoes the other, and they're kind of neutral. That's possibly the reason we haven't seen it happen again.
Well, all I know, if we had it as a government, I would be using it all over the place against some of these heinous dictators.
Right, but maybe as soon as it was invented, it was distributed equally.
To kind of balance things?
Yes.
Well, that's a possibility. It is. Time for a few more calls. Annie's in Alabama. Hello, Annie.
Yes, I'm calling about the new high fructose corn syrup that has replaced the sugar and stevia in Sierra Mist. It's now called Mist Twist. The solution for that is everybody call Pepsi at once and demand your money back and get a case number. If they get flooded enough, it'll happen just like it did with the old Coke. They had to go back to the old Coke because of the number of complaints. And the new packaging also with foods and supplements has lids with no threads. It's not airtight and it does not screw on. It gets contaminated with germs and bugs that are too small to see. People are getting sick. Like I said about the other product, everybody call the manufacturer at once and demand your money back and get a case number. Because there's no excuse for these lids to have these hashes on here that are not airtight when they've had lids with threads that screw on for over 100 years. Why would they want to go to something that's less?
And those
secure?
things worked. They worked well, didn't they?
You get your own mason jars, and you can order your own lids, one-piece lids. You don't have to have two-piece lids. And when you get the stuff, transfer it immediately because it goes bad extremely fast. Supplements, coffee, they want it to go bad. They want it to rot overnight so they can make you buy some more.
Or buy the real stuff, too. You never know. That's our consumer report from Annie in Alabama. She pops on every once in a while with that kind of information. So a little information here. Don't forget, those of you who want to meet up with people, go to paranormalday.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. We've got Instagram as well. And we do put up our digicams. Always go to our website, coasttocoastam.com, several times a day. Just look at all the stories on the highlight reel, in the news, and the guests. And after the show, by the way, we have that recap where we put, all the information about the show. And, of course, bumper music's there, and sign up for the free Coast Zone newsletter, too. For Dan Galante, Tom Dandizer, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesseur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Boros, and George Knapp, I'm George Noory, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.